When you load up a level from a video game, it's likely you'll hear all sorts of characters speaking in the background. From shop NPCs to the main characters, they may have lots of small, offhand comments that make the world feel more alive. Well, these are actually referred to as barks, and today I'll be showing you how to write barks for video games. Hi, I'm Rhi, and welcome back to the third and final instalment of my script writing series here at DevTalk & Tea. As always, a moment for the brew. Today we are drinking a Twinings peppermint tea because it is almost 5 p.m. I do not want any more caffeine and it's very hot outside, so I just want something a little bit more herbal today. So we've already given a brief introduction to what barks are, but let's add a little bit more detail. Barks are often shorter lines of dialogue that you hear throughout the game, sometimes without triggering the characters to speak. Some examples of these could include background comments or conversations from NPCs, phrases from characters during combat, characters saying hello or goodbye, or effort noises, which are sounds that characters make when they jump or hit something or dodge roll, for instance. With my previous videos in this series, we've written a lot of scripts using a traditional script format. However, today, when we're writing barks, we're going to be doing something a little bit different: spreadsheets. I know you might be thinking that that sounds quite clinical, but actually it's fairly common to use this format for dialogue sheets and for writing barks. So I think it's going to be easier for us to just jump straight into the spreadsheet so you can see what I mean. Welcome to the dialogue sheet. Typically for a video game you will have one or sometimes maybe more dialogue sheets where all the dialogue in the game goes. This includes the scripts we've written earlier, but we won't go into that in this video. Instead, let's look at some of the columns in this spreadsheet, mainly these 5: line ID, character, parenthetical, script, and context. 3 of these you will recognize from the traditional script. Character covers who is saying the line, parenthetical describes the direction of the line, and script is the dialogue that is said. As for context, this allows us to add functional context to each line that may be worth outlining for those who don't want to keep referring back to the script. This is kind of more technical minded as well, rather than performative like the parenthetical. Lastly, we have line ID. We'll leave this for now and come back to that later. Otherwise, let's look at these first set of lines to see what we're working with. So that includes this chunk here. Okay, so what we have here is a bunch of general commentary lines. These are lines where maybe if you walk up close to a character, it will trigger a line of dialogue. So right now we have the character of Vala, and then we have 5 variations of what she could say, plus the context here when in proximity, so that anybody, even if they're not from the narrative team, can look in here and maybe they're part of the tech team and they understand when this line is meant to play. So right now we just have a selection of 5 different short and sweet lines. First of all, let's talk about why we've chosen 5 in this example. 5 is a nice number to work with. Typically I'll work in 3s as a minimum, then 5s, then maybe 10, and then not often do we go more than 10 unless it's a very specific use case scenario. But 5 basically gives us enough variety to make sure that if you walk up to this character, they're not just repeating the same thing again and again. This is something that we covered in the previous video for interactive scripts as well. Now, as for the length of these lines, they're quite short, and that's also intentional because if a player walks past a character and they start saying some sort of line, we don't want it to feel like a full-on monologue because there's a chance that the player will just simply walk past the character. So we want it to be short enough that the player can hear what's being said, but also make sure that it gives some sort of, life into the scene or context into what we're doing in this particular moment in the game, just to help kind of create that synergy between the plot of the game, the character, and the world itself. So because you can see how short a lot of these lines are that we're going to be looking at today, this is part of the reason why you can kind of just get away with writing these straight in to a dialogue sheet rather than going through the effort of creating, a Word document for your main script and copying them over in here. Instead, it might benefit the speed in which you work by just writing them directly into the sheet. This might not always be the case, but it is something to consider based on your team size, the amount of script you have to write, your general workflow, etc., etc. Okay, now let's look at the next batch of lines here from Quiffy. We have 3. Oops, there we go, 3. 3 lines here. These are all saying hello. And I'd like to kind of give you an idea of maybe a practice of how to work within a dialogue sheet by using these 3 hello lines here. Now, sometimes a line is, equally as functional as it is narrative, or maybe more functional than narrative. And in these instances, what I tend to like to do is obviously have things in the context. Right here we have greeting when in proximity with the character, so we want 3 variations of this character, Quiffy, saying hello when the character walks past. Of course, we've already established that we don't want the same thing to trigger again and again and again, so what I'll tend to do is when I'm working at setting up the amount of lines that I have to write is I will just punch in placeholder lines, and these are what I would establish as placeholder lines. They all say the same thing. But what we're going to do after we've established that we want 3 lines for Quiffy to say hello is that I'll go back in and we'll have 1 line that says hello. The next line will say, hi there. And the last line will say, hey. You get the gist of it. But that might also be a useful way in which to work when going straight into the dialogue sheet to create barks. Okay, the next 3 lines we have are what we refer to as efforts or onos. These are basically lines that are more physical exertions. It's more when you're fighting or jumping or lifting something. Think of Link from Legend of Zelda with the infamous "ha" line. I know that was terrible, please don't judge me for my acting, I just write. So what we've got here is we have the same as previous. We've got 3 lines here from the character Trickery. We have some parenthetical to give to the actor, so we can see that the context here is they're casting a difficult spell. And then in the context, we have specifically they're casting lightning. This might be a specific name of a spell that is used for gameplay. Again, keeping this more technical, but it kind of bridges the gap between the parenthetical and the context here. Now, what we've got is we've got 3 variations of how you could write an effort noise. So the first one is literally brackets, effort noise, because we want to be able to perhaps give the actor some room to literally breathe in some instances, so they're not just constrained to making one particular noise. So for the time being, before you have it recorded, you might just want to stub in brackets effort or brackets effort noise and let the actor come up with multiple variations of that noise themselves. Then after you've chosen what lines you prefer from the actor, you can then go in and maybe write the specific subtitle for it, because spoiler alert, a dialogue sheet is usually also used to create the subtitles from all of the script here. So just something to keep in mind. The second way in which we can do it is literally writing out a noise for them to say. This might be because you do have a specific noise or exertion in mind for the actor, because it's something that is important to the thing that they're doing. It just might be a personal preference. Now, the third is an example of an effort that is actually using words. It doesn't always have to be just a random noise of exertion. It can also include some phrases or words. So if you're keen on having your character say a specific catchphrase or a line of dialogue that goes with an effort, then you can also write that in as well. Alright, now we're going to go into the last example of barks, and this is a conversation. So barks don't necessarily just have to be one and done in terms of a line. They can be a group of lines that are combined to create a conversation, or that play one after another. For example, one character might have two bark lines that play right after each other, or in this instance, you have two characters that are acting out a conversation. In fact, we have two conversations here. We have conversation, let's see, 1 and conversation 2. In fact, we've put it here in the context. This is why it's important to have context. So we have 4 lines in conversation 1 and 2 lines in conversation 2. We have our 2 characters here outlined, Brombolia and Arctic. We make use of the parenthetical for some of the lines to make sure that the actor understands some of the delivery of these dialogue lines, and then we have the script itself. So we just have a little short back and forth between Brombolia and Arctic, the first one being, "I'm not sure this is a good idea." "What's this? Our cleric is lacking faith in her team." "No, you failed to inspire my faith. There's a difference." "You wound me." Now, these can play one after each other, and it's likely that these could play when you interact with a character, or when you get close to a character, you can hear them having these conversations. Again, the aim is to make this feel like the world is alive and real, and these characters are real. So what may happen here is you will write this, and there may be a piece of technology, which I'm not going to go into today, where you establish that these lines are being read in this specific order. Obviously, we've already tagged them in the context that this is banter 1. But then afterwards we have banter 2. And banter 2 starts with, "I really hope you've had enough healing spells for us all, because I don't like our odds. Look who's lacking faith now." This combination is intentionally written after the first banter. So maybe something that you want to establish with your tech team, or maybe you want to establish it further in the context, is that these particular conversational lines have to play in a certain order. Brombolia and Arctic banter 1 has to play before Brombolia and Arctic banter 2 can play, because this calls back to the lack of faith conversation they had earlier. Otherwise, it won't make sense. I hope that did make sense, however, because now we're going to go into something a little bit more complex, and although it's not specifically about writing barks, it is introducing this concept of a dialogue sheet, which is quite important to a narrative design process in video games. I'm not going to go into it in a lot of detail, but I'm going to just introduce you to the logic behind it so you can get an idea. And this is the line ID column. We said we'd come back to it. Here we are, we're coming back to it. Basically, a line ID column gives every single line of dialogue in the game a unique ID. This is because we have to. If we want to trigger this particular line of dialogue in the game, then we have to somehow trigger it. And this is where you would refer to a line ID. So that's why we have every single line as a unique identification. Also, of course, when you're recording these lines, you want to give them a name. And so the line IDs are often also used for naming the audio files, whether that is a WAV file, for instance. You will want to keep them all consistent. That way you can understand what line is being played. So why don't we then just use line 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 1000? Well, line IDs can also be used to help us identify the line without having to listen to it. And this can really help in the testing stage or the bug stage of when you're developing a video game. So let's have a look at these lines, because it looks like a lot of garbage, like it looks like all a jarbled mess. But the logic here is that we want to give us, at a glance, a really quick overview of who says this line, what kind of line is it, and where it's being played. These are 3 quite key pieces of information that are typically used for a line ID, so that if a particular piece of audio, a piece of dialogue doesn't trigger, then we can easily identify what it was meant to say. Or if there's a particular bug with a line and it's being all weird and garbled and there's issues with it, again, we can look at what comes up on our debug screen in Unreal Engine, for instance, and it will come up with the line ID, and we can easily identify what that line is meant to be, who says it, so we can narrow down what line exactly it is and what it's meant to do. So right now we've used ELI. Now that is shorthand for the location or the level of this game that we're in currently where this line plays. So ELI stands for Elion Gallus, which is the name of the location. Now we have COM. COM in this instance just refers to a comment. So we in this game, as an example, are just using the term comment for any lines that are just little offhand comments in the world. Then we have a shorthand for the character, which is VAL, Vala, and then we just have the numbers next to it to signify which number line this is. So the reason why we use 001 rather than 01 is typically we anticipate that we may go over 100 lines for a given instant, just because it's a known thing that that's possible. You rarely exceed 1,000 unless you don't have a lot of other signifiers here in the line ID, but for now we're just using 001. So if we go down, we can see that there's a similar format here, but instead of Val, we have Quiff for Quiffy. If we go further down, we have here GAN. So that typically refers to generic. So it's not specified to a particular level, but it's a line that maybe could be played throughout multiple different levels. So these effort noises, for instance, Trickery might be able to cast this spell whenever they want or across the game in multiple locations. So we just maybe want to put that as Gen. We've put F here, EFF, to shorthand for effort. We've had a shorthand for Trickery, which is TRI, and also we've added an extra ID here of SPE, which is going to be shorthand for spell. Just to clarify, these are my own shorthands. You can come up with whatever shorthands work best for you and your project, but these are just my particular preferences for this example. So the reason why we might want to add an additional piece of identification here is because Trickery might have a lot of generic efforts. So we might want to also specify in the line that these are his spell efforts. If we need to grab a bunch of his spell efforts from a folder for the audio team, they can easily identify, hey, these are all the spells from Trickery because they're all ID'd with SPE. Alright, and lastly, we go back to Elion Gallus with the ELI, and instead of COM, we've gone for BAN, short for banter, and then we've got Brombolia's name, shorthand, plus the number, as per usual. So this is the same for Arctic, but with ART instead. And I think that pretty much covers it. I know that's a very fast whistle-stop tour on line IDs. This is something that probably will require a little bit more practice to understand, and I'm happy to talk more about it in another video, but just as a very basic, brief overview as to line IDs and what they are and why we want to use them, that is your crash course. But otherwise, let's head back to IRL Rian to speak about the rest of this video. So now you should understand the basics of how to create a dialogue sheet and the basics of writing barks for video games. And if you have seen my previous 2 videos in this series, you would also now know how to script for cinematics and script for interactive conversations. So kudos to you for sticking around this long. But genuinely, I really hope whether you've seen just this video or all 3, that it's been helpful or informative, and thank you so much for watching and spending your time here with me today. I always try to endeavour to make the Dev Talking Tea videos informative in some way, whether that is something a bit more tutorialised like these videos, or something a little bit more low-key where we just kind of discuss or share some thoughts and feelings. So if you have any suggestions of what you'd like to see next for Dev Talking Tea, let me know. Otherwise, I shall see you in the next video, which is likely going to be a LARP video, specifically Empire. So if you're interested in that, please do stick around. And I hope you have a lovely day wherever you are, and I'll see you next time. Bye.